Hello, everyone, and welcome to our Stewardship Development and Fundraising Forum. I am Sean McMahon, President of Client Services for the Steier Group. It is Wednesday, June 3rd. We are in week 12 of this nationwide pandemic, but slowly and surely, as the weeks pass, more and more good news to report as churches across the country are starting to return to in-person services. And for many churches, they're starting to face the real financial fallout of not having parishioners and members in the pews. That's led to a significant financial crunch and also led to services like the Steier Group's stabilization appeal, which you just saw a sneak preview of there. We're going to dig into that today and more with this session, eliminating the envelope, the tough transition to online giving. The majority of parishes and churches have, of course, already had to address this since the shutdown of churches in March. But it's an evolving process, and it's something that you really need to think about and execute well moving forward. And we hope that the discussion today will get you on the right track or give you some tips and pointers that will help you moving forward. We're going to talk to church leaders who have already gone through the process, done it very well. We'll also talk to some who are just starting. So we hope that you can get some perspective wherever you find yourself on that spectrum. As with all forums, we are live. This is a virtual brainstorm. We encourage questions. If there are different topics that you'd like to cover at the very end, we're more than willing to go back to those. We have our church leaders and panel of experts. We also have our Steier Group personnel on the line to answer any questions that you might have. A couple of ground rules. If you haven't joined us before, as you enter the forum, you are on mute. So if you do want to speak, make sure that you unmute the microphone. If you have a question, use that chat button at the bottom of your screen. My colleague Brian Norton will be monitoring that throughout the session, and we'll ask questions as they come up. And again, if there are topics you want to cover, please bring them up at the end. Want to be a good resource for whatever is on your mind. We have a lot of development and church personnel on the line. If there are other topics that you'd like to tackle, just let us know. Want to introduce our panel for today. We're very grateful to be joined by Jared Fritz. Jared is the Senior Partner and Marketing Manager for PushPay. PushPay is based out of Seattle, Washington. They are a software company that brings mobile technology to churches, and they've really been at the forefront of the digital giving process. Reverend Carla Shaw is the Senior Pastor at Point Loma Presbyterian Church in San Diego. Andrea Quinn and Pat Rutz, Campaign Coordinator and Business Manager at St. Vincent de Paul Catholic Church in Houston, Texas. And Dominic Ambrosio, Communications Director at Corpus Christi Catholic Church in Chatham, New Jersey. And a special kudos to Dominic for joining us in the midst of a power outage in Chatham due to some bad storms there. He has somehow figured out how to get himself online in the midst of the storm. So Dominic, we're very grateful to have you and the rest of our panel here. As we always do, we would like to start in prayer, and Carla Shaw has graciously agreed to lead us today. Carla.
Please pray with me. Gracious God, we do thank you for this opportunity to gather together as the church across denomination, across borders. Lord, we thank you that you are in our midst and that you care deeply about our pocketbooks. And Lord, there's nothing in Scripture that is more repeated, Lord, through the mouth of Jesus. And so we pray, Lord, that you give us wisdom in what it means to steward your world more, steward our resources more, and that you give us insight in this new age. And so we thank you in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen. Carla, thank you very much. And again, today's topic, eliminating the envelope. And to some degree, that's maybe a little misleading because it is tough to eliminate that envelope giving in all cases, but that's certainly what we're shooting forward to as we try to transition givers who are putting cash in the collection basket or that envelope giving to try to transition to a digital format that is much more consistent, particularly in the case of a pandemic or something like that we have experienced here in the last few months. I want to begin with Jared Fritz. Again, he is the Senior Partner and Marketing Manager for PushPay. And Jared, I have got to believe that your phone has been ringing off the hook the past 2 months because it's not just the online giving piece, it's total technology. Churches have really had to transition to very quickly and kind of get up to speed as quickly as they can.
Yeah, thanks, Sean. Can you hear me all right? Am I coming through?
Absolutely.
Good. So yeah, it has been a crazy time, especially May. Usually when we have a conversation with a church about signing up for our tools, they take months to go through committees and have a good systematic process for it. That quickly changed to days. People were making decisions very quickly because they knew they needed a tool to capture online giving. And we have been very strategic about making sure it's easy for those churches to implement the tools quickly because the time is of the essence to make sure people can hit their budgets.
And we're starting to bring up some statistics here. And Jared, I know, collections being top of mind, that digital giving program can be so important. And I know that you and your group have done a lot of research that supports that.
Yeah, we have. And I'm going to dive into some best practices after this. But before I do, I want to set the stage a little bit with some stats to help kind of emphasize why I'm talking about the things I am. First of all, we see that 74% of churches across the country already offer some form of online giving. And that's pretty impressive because 20 years ago, we were at 0%. So really strong growth. I think the remaining churches that don't have it, those are small country churches in general. Most medium and large churches already have a system in place for online giving, especially now. But it's interesting to see the decline of cash and check as people transition to digital giving. We've seen that over the last 10 years, checks went from representing 46% of all gifts to now less than 15%. Which is because of people like me. Often I am to blame. We love to blame millennials for everything. And I'll be honest, I do not have a checkbook. I have written some checks in my lifetime, but I faithfully give to my church online because that's the way I kind of was raised in this digital world. On the next slide, we'll talk about kind of digital giving and the benefits. We PushPay, our software platform, we can record cash and check donations in there. So we have the data as to how much giving is happening across the whole spectrum. And we've found that digital givers donate 33% more than non-digital givers, and they donate 44% more often. Now, those two things go hand in hand. I think this second stat is even more powerful, especially in a conversation with the Steier Group, who is no stranger to capital campaigns and pledge campaigns. Digital givers are almost 8 times more likely to give to multiple initiatives than non-digital givers. And there's a host of reasons for that. I'm going to be speedy because I want us to get to the meat of this conversation with the church staff people that we have here. But I'll end with this last stat. Over the last year, when we look at growth in giving across our platform, we saw a 35% increase in mobile giving, while non-mobile giving, all other forms, only grew by 15%. So there's clearly demand on the mobile side of digital giving, people giving on their phones, and that is something that churches should take seriously looking at that stat. And so I'm going to walk through 3 more slides, and I really have 2 kind of core action items for anyone who's listening today. The first is to assess your current solution. I'm assuming that your church probably already has some kind of online giving, and I'll remind you, the reason for online giving, the whole reason it came out initially was because it's easy and convenient. And so But we've learned that that's not actually true of all platforms. And there's a lot of good online giving systems, and there's some that don't perform as well. And so I encourage you, if you have time this afternoon, to really dive into what is it like for someone to give to your church through your website. And I have 5 focus areas for you to examine through that lens. The first is it mobile friendly? We know that mobile donations are important. People have their computer at home and they have their computer in their pocket all the time. So you should examine if you have a mobile friendly platform. The second focus area is the login system. Is it easy does someone need to remember a username and password to give to the church, or can they log in through their face ID on their phone or through their phone number authentication? It's worth examining. The third focus area is page design. When someone visits your online giving page, does it feel like they're giving to your church, or does it feel like they're processing a transaction with a business? It's worth examining that. The fourth is campaign tools. A lot of online giving platforms have ways for people to submit their pledges digitally and then track their pledges against their actual giving throughout the year. And then finally, administrative features. We know that on the phone today are mostly church admins, and these features are really helpful. But there's one note here. I encourage you, as you're doing this assessment, to prioritize your church members over your staff. Because for every one church, there's probably 100 church members that are using that platform. And so I encourage you to think of them first, even if you have to sacrifice some integrations with other systems. If it's easier for people to give, it's better for the church's bottom line. So that's my first action item, is to assess your current solution. The second is to create a promotion plan for your church for online giving. And I'm not going to dive too into the weeds, because we have some amazing church staff that have done this really well, and I want to learn from them. There's some obvious things out there that I probably don't need to address, but I will. It should be easy to find online giving on your website, probably right there on the top line. But one thing I like to encourage is to provide multiple on-ramps to digital giving. Giving on your website is kind of the obvious one, but if your church has a church app, people should be able to give through that. If your church lets people text in prayer requests, can you set up a short code where if someone texts give to that phone number, it'll send them back the giving link? The more on-ramps to digital giving you can provide, the more people are going to adapt it, because they'll find the way that suits them best. And then my final point on this slide is to really embrace online giving in the culture of your church. And this, I will need to lean on our other speakers to talk about best practices. But I know that I've been to churches where often people who give digitally aren't recognized during the giving moment or the offering moment, even though they're just as faithful with their giving to the church. But really, the church hasn't embraced that in their culture. And so hopefully we can address that later in this presentation. Two final thoughts for you. If you want to take this seriously, transitioning your cash and check givers over to digital, I've often heard we measure what matters. And so I encourage you today to go and take a measurement. How many cash, how many check, and how many digital givers do I have? So that a month or 2 months from now, you can check your progress. But with that in mind, don't forget about cash and check givers. I was eating lunch with my grandma on Saturday and talking to her about this presentation, and she said that if her church stopped taking checks, she would probably stop giving to her church. And so we can't exclude these people just because it's a different form of giving. Their giving is valuable and important, and we can't forget about that. And so, Sean, that's kind of the end of my 5 slides. I know I flew through that, but I wanted to leave some time for the meat of the conversation here.
Yeah, thank you, Jared. And maybe we could just start with you in terms of your last point there, which is getting the total transition to online giving may be an unrealistic goal. Could you share with people, I know you work with a lot of churches, what would you consider a very good percentage of givers, not the entire congregation, but the percentage of givers being online?
Yeah, Sean, it is so relative. It's so relative to the demographic of your church. There are churches that we work with in LA that are all millennials that are 90 to 100% digital giving. And that is outstanding, but that is not what I expect of a church. I think anything more than 50% of your giving coming through digital, I'm pretty impressed with. I think you're definitely in the right direction. When you're hitting 70 to 80%, you might never get better than that. That's outstanding. But if you're only seeing your total digital giving around 20 to 30%, there's definitely room for growth.
That's good parameters. I want to bring in Dominic now. And Dominic, I think you're still on the line here. You might be joining us by fire and power generator, but we appreciate you being with us through the storm. Your parish, Corpus Christi in Chatham, New Jersey, I know has gone through this process. How long ago did you start? Do you have an idea of what percentage of givers are now online, and kind of maybe set the stage for how things are at your parish right now?
Sure, Sean. Hello, everyone. We started back technically in December when we started to do research on the provider, on the system, on the platform. We had an existing platform prior to that. We were not satisfied with the interface, the user experience, and the reliability of the platform. So we spent about 5 or 6 weeks back in December, and we decided on another platform, PushPay. And in doing that, we had a lot of hand-holding with PushPay. We spent a lot of time with their staff. They came in to see us a couple of times, and a lot of vetting. But I think the whole piece started with the overall strategy and the leadership of our pastor and our administration, wanting to go in this direction, setting the tone, able to believe that this is where the future was. Now, our parish is roughly, I would say, 25 miles from New York City due west. And it's in a fairly affluent area, and our demographic is slightly older. We skews probably 55, 65, 75, year old folks, and very generous, very giving. And we had thought, well, that's no way are they going to transition over to electronic giving, because we had electronic giving and it was about 8 or 9%. Now, I can tell you we're up to almost 25% in about 3 or 4 months. Okay. And it's, is it partially because of the pandemic? I would say a little bit. But I would also say to a certain degree, it's the way we approached it, the way our leadership endorsed it, and the way we downplayed the sacred cow of envelopes. Okay. And it's important as a Catholic for 45,000 years that envelope is it's my ticket. And then I get my receipt when I leave, called a bulletin, when I leave Mass. But that concept of giving in with something physical, whether a check or cash or an envelope, and receiving something back, we had to shift that paradigm. And I in total support of what Jared was talking about, because we didn't sell PushPay, we didn't sell electronic giving, we sold the benefits of electronic giving. We sold ease, convenience, speed, security. And what we saw back in return was reporting, metrics, measurement. We saw all the things that could help us forecast and be more strategic about what we wanted to do. We took a more secular view of the approach rather than a non-secular view.
And I think you bring up an important point, which is it's not just a giving mechanism, it's a changing of culture. So Dominic, or I don't know if any of our other speakers want to chime in, but it is changing a culture of giving that has been created over generations through envelopes.
Yes.
Any others, Andrea or Carla? Maybe let's transition to Carla out in San Diego, Point Loma Community Presbyterian. This is a church that has gone through this process quite a while ago. They actually started the transition 3 years ago. 90% of their collections are offered as a stewardship pledge in the fall. More than half of their giving is online, and that is a combination of recurring weekly gifts or periodic giving, but they are above that 50% metric that Jared referenced earlier. And year to date, here in 2020, their giving is actually up slightly compared to 2019. And when you consider all of the barriers of the pandemic and not being able to hold services in person, that is a remarkable statistic to be where they are at. They have obviously benefited from having that online platform. So maybe Carla, could you bring us back to 3 years ago when you started this process? What prompted you to make the decision, and how did you overcome that kind of generational culture of giving in one certain way?
So we probably started the process more like 4 years ago with our research, similar to what Dominic was saying, looking at different platforms. We did decide, we're not with PushPay, sorry, Jared. We did decide to go with an integrated platform, which we are questioning at this point, to be honest. We went with a platform called Simple Church. I'm assuming you're familiar with them. There's pros and cons to that. We're very aware of the cons at this point, but there are also pros. I think one of the reason we decided to go this route is because we saw this is the way people give, and so we made a commitment as a church to move forward in this. And there were definitely a lot of growing pains. We were, just like many of you, were an envelope-based church, and we no longer have envelopes. We have, let me say that differently. We have a few people that still request envelopes, but they are not widely distributed. I think the hardest part about the movement for us, we also are predominantly older congregation. 72% of us, maybe it's a little less than that at this point, are over the age of 55. Mm-hmm. So the hardest part was breaking habits. And once we did that, though, once the culture itself shifted, it's been a very easy transition. So communication was a huge part of that, which has already been alluded to. Some of our biggest stumbling blocks were our lack of communication, our bad communication, in terms of actually physically walking people online and helping them through the technological process, which I know a lot of us have been doing during this pandemic. How do you get people to turn on computers and know how to use them? And so we had a lot of hand holding there. About a year or so into our process, we discovered a large gap in income. And we realized it's because there were a whole group of people that we did not come alongside of personally. And so we ended up having to call one-on-one a lot of people and physically help them with the technological part of this process. And so there were things definitely learned in that. I think the loss that we've experienced, I mean, recently I just looked at this last month, and 75% of our giving is online this past month. 25% is via check, and it's still our largest givers, our largest donors are still giving through their retirement accounts or trusts or whatever. So they're not necessarily, they're online, but in a different way. I think the biggest challenge for us is when people sign up for reoccurring giving, we lose an opportunity in that for people to give in real time. And so we've, as a church, been struggling over the last year and a half of how do we make giving more a part of our weekly responsive worship to God. How do we make it when it's just a button people push, or it's something they've set up to happen all the time? And so there's been a great theological conversation around that. But all aspects, as Jared was saying, text giving, online giving, all those things are part of our worship service at this point. So they're all equally valued, but I would say online is by far the biggest motivator at this point. And the thing through the pandemic has been interesting is people that would normally give cash, which in the Presbyterian, in my church is not many. We don't rely on the weekly offering very much. It's like very tiny bit of our yearly income because we do campaigns. But even those that give cash are now giving through text, or they're giving online, and we're now able to put names to our cash givers, which has been kind of nice because it opens up ministry for us to them to be able to relate to them in a different way. So that's been really nice.
I want to ask Jared, put you on the spot. There are two aspects of that I'm wondering if you can react to, which is number one, the fact that the larger givers in her congregation were not online giving. Is that something that you typically see? And the other being the response to trying to get giving as part of the weekly ministry and having that maybe at odds with a recurring payment. Maybe you could touch on those two topics if you would.
Happy to. let's see, two questions there. I'll answer the theology one first. PushPay as a business tries to stay out of the theology of giving. We really want to be more of a software tool best practice. But I've heard it both ways. I've heard that setting up a recurring gift is impersonal and excludes you from that weekly offering moment. I've heard the other side, that setting up a recurring donation is a big act of sacrifice, and that we automate what's important, and that automating that giving is putting Christ first. And so, not sure how to really answer that question of bringing people into the Sunday experience of giving, but I do encourage you to think about both perspectives. And then Sean, remind me, what was the first question?
Some of those larger givers were still not online. Is that typical or not?
Right. I think across all of nonprofits, we see that what we would classify as major givers are generally older people, and so are more comfortable with cash and check. And then when people are making major donations, usually it's going to be through cash and check, or again through retirement accounts, through stock transfers. That's something. It's the other side where cash and check might be things, or people in Sunday service. The other side of larger donations, we also need to be mindful of that.
All right, that's good stuff there. I want to bring in our friends down in Houston, Andrea and Pat, St. Vincent de Paul. I know that you're on the forefront of this, so maybe a little bit like Corpus Christi in New Jersey, you started looking at this several months before the pandemic unfolded, but maybe weren't able to implement it quite as completely as you'd like. Maybe share a little bit where you are in the process and some of the things that you've learned kind of through the last couple months that have been helpful and might be helpful to others.
Well, we had online giving for about 6 years prior to this, to changing. But we weren't that well. What happened was I went to a PushPay conference, thanks to the Steier Group for inviting me, and I went up to Washington in January, and just what they were saying made a lot of sense. So I came back and spoke with Pat, and then someone came from PushPay, and we felt like we weren't capturing a part of our demographics, which is the young people, because they don't write checks, they don't carry cash. And we had an online giving, but it was clunky and it was hard to kind of get through. So speaking of the platform and the things that you mentioned earlier, Jared, I think that's part of the reason we switched to PushPay, is we wanted it to be a better experience. And we have about 40% of our, we have 40% of our gifts coming through online. And we are, we started in March. So we started with all this with the pandemic. And so we haven't really rolled it out the way we wanted to roll it out. But, we've seen a lot of people get on PushPay, and I don't know if that's because of the pandemic or if it is because it's easier. I think people are reaching out for ways to give. We also still have our envelope givers. We still have our large gifts that come from IRAs. That's an issue. They won't go online. I mean, I don't think they really could. And then we still have cash, but for the longest time we didn't have any cash. And if we hadn't had the recurring gifts on our old platform and to PushPay, we would not have survived through this pandemic. But we are in the midst of transitioning our recurring givers from the former platform to PushPay. And so that's been interesting. It's a challenge. We've got about 50% of the givers have transitioned already, for their recurring gifts. But we're now at the point where we're calling individually and assisting them to move over. And it's not that it's hard, but it's just another email that you have to do something with, and if you're not in a place when you get that email, you don't do it. So I think that's what we're struggling with. And then we had intended to roll out this big thing at Mass and have people in the church and people help kind of help everyone get on push pay. And yet, it's been a much smaller amount of people in church. And then we, but the good thing is we're live streamed. So at least, if you're at home, you might pull your phone out. Whereas people in our Catholic church don't pull their phone out in church. That there's like a taboo about that, So I think that's kind of a struggle. I don't know how else to do it, It's kind of the culture. Again, I think it's just the culture of the Catholic Church. Anything else?
No, that's good. And I do want to, before I transition, anything else from Dominic, Jared, or Carla in response to that in terms of actively promoting and getting people to make that switch and how you do that tactfully in the church setting?
Well, we also have parishioners who are kind of influencers within the different ministries. So the leadership asked all those folks to actually be the first early adopters into PushPay. And by doing that, that kind of spread the news, and they network within their ministries to say, hey, I did it. You can do it. It's pretty easy. Look how simple it is. They actually would show them on their phone. And I remember at this finance committee meeting when we were introducing PushPay, we did a presentation and we just called it up, on the projector. And we just said, look at this. Look how easy. And we had them download the app and they said, oh, I could do that. That's very easy. So that kind of community building, that kind of excitement, that kind of newness really sets people into a good mood, so to speak, and they're not fearful of it. And we also say, look, it's more secure. You don't have to pay for a stamp. You don't have to put, saves us envelopes, because at this point we're going to be announcing that envelopes are not the first thing you're going to see when you are a new parishioner. That's going to be an option. That's a special request, envelopes. It's not something you're going to get normally. We do something kind of fun on our live stream. And you guys, adopt this if you'd like. It's something to share. When Father Kevin will announce the offertory, he will also say, we're going to have our digital usher take up the offertory. Text to whatever, right? And he makes it a little bit more fun, and then we play some music so people have time to make their donation like they would at church. And we're also finding out, typical Catholic approach is that people come to our live stream 10 or 15 minutes before Mass. They just sit, they're at home, they're probably in the same position with the same cup of coffee, with the same pajamas on, and they do what they normally do, right? So we'll do an announcement before Mass. Don't forget, so we try to, take the edge away from that and that fear of electronics and make it simple and easy. And just, we're not selling technology. We're just selling the convenience and the security of it.
I think we've pretty well established that there's not a total elimination of the envelope. So at least in 2020, that may be a bridge too far. But I know that there are active ways to transition. And I want to touch on that a little bit, which is the actual kind of nuts and bolts strategies that you all use to get the person who is the standard, traditional envelope giver to make that transition to online outside of the kind of promotions in church. I know that one thing that is done is if you receive a check in the mail, you do something with that. And maybe, Andrea, I'll let you start that conversation and others chime in with additional ideas.
So now that we are on the PushPay platform, our check givers, when we enter their gift, we're now entering it into PushPay. They get an email receipt, and on that receipt, they get an invitation to become an online giver. So that's new. That's something new that we did not do before. We just went ahead and put the check into our database. We use PDS, and we posted everything there. But now we're using PushPay, and we saw that as a huge benefit, because then people, I feel like, they know that we received it, and they get acknowledgement right away. But interestingly enough, we've heard from a couple of parishioners, just two people, that I don't really want to get a receipt. So we're like, what do you do? But we're still going to do it. I think it's.
And that's something that you can do even without a PushPay platform if you're getting weekly checks to generate and send out an email. Carla, are you at the point where you're not having to have that discussion with new members, or you're far enough in the process that it's part of the culture? Or do you find yourself continuously having to try to, I don't want to say wage the battle, but continue the transition all the time?
You know, to be honest with you, I didn't even know that we still had envelopes until I asked yesterday, because we rarely get them anymore. They're so few and far between. That's how far along in the process we are. So I do think there is a point when you could eliminate envelopes. I have been surprised. I know Jared's said that millennials don't, millennials don't carry checks, but to be honest with you, our oldest members are the ones that use our platform even more than our youngest. So I think once they understand the tech, like our 90-year-olds are all reoccurring online at this point. And I think it's because they just need someone to tell them. And once it's easier for them, it's more convenient for them. It's like one less thing to have to remember. So we have found that if the relationship is there and you're walking with them and they trust you, it's far more convenient.
Now that you're kind of far down the line, and you had touched on this earlier, Carla, but are there any words of wisdom that you think are absolutely important to pass on to churches who might be just starting this process?
Oh man, I wish I had it. I'm just glad we did the process. Maybe that's the best way to say it. I mean, I feel like this has really set us in the pandemic to be really financially not just stable, but this is the best year we've ever had. And last year I said that, and this year it's more. And I think it's because we've just made it easy for people. It's just been easy. I do think it's also provided for us a way to have people give not just to the church, but to other things as well, which people are looking to do. So when there's disasters and there's things in our country, it's real time. And statistics show that the more giving anybody does to any organization also increases the giving to your congregation. And so we're able to provide felt moments in real time, and that's and meet real needs. So that's been a benefit as well.
I don't want to get too far off on a tangent, but to me it's such a jarring statement that I want our audience to kind of be clued in on this, which was last time you joined us, you said that you are actually considering a ministry where you don't return to an in-person service. Obviously, the online giving is just a piece of that puzzle, but maybe you could just expand on that a little bit, which is the pandemic has really made you reimagine, borrowing a term from you, how to do service altogether, and that, the church of the future might be virtual as well.
Yeah, so I mean, I don't know what state you guys are from, but I mean, California, we've been a little bit lagging in terms of in-person return, and we are now allowed to return, but we haven't yet done so. And a lot of the churches in our region are especially those of us that are doing well, are questioning why we're returning now when it's unsafe, but also we're thriving sort of virtually. And so I feel like it's been more intimate in our virtual services than probably in person. And I think that's created a different communal feel. And people have looked forward to church, not that they didn't before, but it's they're really looking forward. It's a touch point. And so instead of just returning because we're allowed, we've really taken that as a touch point of thought. We just want to be thoughtful regardless of regulation, to really see where God has been at work, and to really carry that into whatever phasing we go into. And so we have not rushed back to in-person for that reason.
I have to ask, because I imagine other people are thinking the same thing. How can a virtual service be more intimate than an in-person service?
I mean, from the words of I don't know how you are all doing in-person services, but we have created, so for example, we still have a large portion of our congregation that worships traditionally in traditional classic forms. We also have non-classic forms, but so our organ, for example, we get to watch the feet of our organist and get into the organ channel and see parts of our building that no one's seen before, that you just don't get when you're sitting there as a participant. You feel more part of what's going on, I feel like, from the front. So When I'm preaching, I do it directly into the camera, so it's eye to eye. People are commenting. I feel like you're speaking directly to me, and I don't feel that when I'm in this space. And so we're questioning whether or not to return in the form in which we were before. If this is meeting people in a different way, in a wider way, in a deeper way.
Very interesting. I do want to ask, and God forbid this becomes reality, but there's a lot of talk and thought that we will go through a second wave with the virus. With that looming in the fall and the winter, months down the road, does that accelerate the need and the urgency to try to get all of your congregants and parishioners onto an online giving platform? And I would just open that to Dominic, Andrea, anyone on our panel could maybe address that concern.
You know, Sean, I'm going to give you the feedback that I gave our pastor, and I put it to him this way. I said, there's something called a digital train. And if you're not on that digital train, you're going to be left at the station. I suggest you get in a van right now, and because that train has left the station, you get in a van, drive up real fast to the next station and hop on the train. Because if you don't, you're going to miss out on a lot of different things that are going on right now. Especially you're going to reach a larger audience, a more impactful audience, and you're going to spread the gospel, and you're going to evangelize faster than you've ever known. It's still all about the content. It's still all about the message. I have a friend of mine who's a priest about 50 miles at the Jersey Shore, 50 miles away from the Jersey Shore. He has his iPad in his rectory on his kitchen table, and he celebrates Mass. He's got parishioners now coming in from Alaska, Hawaii, Germany, Japan. It's about the message. It's about the product and the delivery. But these are tools. Jared built a tool set. It's how we use the tool set. It's a tool set. How we apply that tool set is really up to us. What we found is that, and I'll give you a funny story about envelopes from the Catholic world. It's very special, the envelope. And we have a little code on the envelope per family. Every family has a little special code. And we went to PushPay and we said, hey, PushPay, you know, this is a big deal for us. We got to enter this code someplace. We got to figure out how to use this code. We're all in a flutter about this. And I said to them, look, figure out a way to use this code so we can use it to track. Don't you know, 2 months later, they put a plug-in, they built a plug-in for us just for that code. Now we can put the code into the system. They did that in 2 months. That's really good service.
Very good. I do want to bring in Brian Norton, my colleague, who's been monitoring the chat portion. Brian, any questions there from the audience for our presenters?
Yes, yeah, we've got a lot of questions. So I guess the first one here would be when an offering plate is not passed, and this is presumably when church is in person, not necessarily talking about online, but how are people encouraged to give when a plate is not passed?
I'll leave that up to our group, whoever wants to jump in on that one.
Well, we have suggested during, the offertory time, during the live stream, we did. Now we have in-person Mass, but we're still live streaming. And we remind them at the beginning that they can give and the different ways that they can give to the church. And then we do that again at that point. So like when the music's going and the basket, well, I don't think they're even passing a basket right now because just all the people touching. So I don't know if they're using the big long, stick with the basket, or for a while they were standing out by the doors and people would come and give it on their way out. But that's what we've been doing, and unfortunately for us, we really hoped, again, like I said, we haven't had that ministry, connection where people have been together in groups and said, oh yeah, I went to PushPay, or I'm now giving online. It's great. So we feel like there's still a lot more for us to do, post pandemic, if you will. But one thing I didn't mention earlier is that the app, we really like the fact that with PushPay that there is an app that comes with it. And so we had an app at one point, but nobody ever went to it. So we are currently in the process of looking at that app. And with that, we found we needed to definitely update our website because the app and the website go back and forth so much that you could tell right away you were in our old-fashioned website and you weren't in the current app. So, that's something else that we're looking forward to rolling out. So I don't know. we're on the train, but we're just leaving the station.
One of the things that we did is we did what we call a reverse collection. What we did is we took a basket, and inside the basket we put like a little card about push pay and like a little saint card or something, some kind of little door prize. Okay, and people would, instead of putting something into the basket, they took something out of the basket. And we shifted the paradigm to people so they just get it and they look at it differently, and that this is part of the fabric of the community. And and then people talk.
I would encourage any of my Steier Group colleagues on the line, if you're working with parishes that are doing anything specific, obviously feel free to chime in as well. Any other thoughts on offertory before we get to the next question?
I mean, we do similar stuff. We did get rid of offertory baskets and bags at one point, and we brought them back just because it was part of the worship experience, as I mentioned, theologically. But we have people, it sounds like, I don't know if this would fit in the Catholic model, but we do people pull out their phones and we say, okay, it's, we speak to that and we have people pull out their phones.
Anyone else? All right, Brian, next question.
This one's specifically for Jared. Obviously, we've got folks from California, New Jersey, and Texas right now, but do you see any difference in online giving based on, city size or location, state, that kind of thing?
Yeah, I think it's more so about the demographics of your specific church than the demographics of your community. And sure, mostly those will often line up. But I don't think, I think of San Francisco as a more tech forward city than Atlanta, maybe, I don't know. But I think it's really about the demographics of the actual people in your church.
Okay, Brian, go ahead. Next question.
The next question is, did any of our presenters use time during their services to actually show a video or instruction about transitioning to online giving? I know some churchgoers say church is only time for, the Word of God, not church business. So they were curious how this was handled.
We have never done that. We have never interrupted the sacredness of the celebration of Mass or any service with an endorsement for a platform or giving, either before or after when that audience was there, or in a flock note, like an email blast or social media push. But we have kept the sacredness, the joy and the beauty of that worship experience confined to their personal relationship between the parishioner and Jesus Christ.
We similar. We send out detailed instructions via e-blast, but we also set up computers on Sunday mornings and had volunteers helping people sign up in real time so that they didn't have to go home and do it. We did that
we even offered to do some tutoring for folks who are a little bit older and, like, Carla said before, a little bit more challenged in technology, and to help them do that. And then when we get envelopes in now, our new policy is if an envelope comes in the mail, we call that person and we say, hey, you sent us the envelope. That's really great. We appreciate and grateful for your donation. There's another way you can do this to save you a trip to the mailbox. We kind of do a soft sell going back the other way, and people appreciate it. Oh, I didn't know. Really? Oh, that's great. Oh, thank you. So depends. You got to frame it.
Brian, go ahead.
Our next question is, we've never done this before. We haven't started online giving. What's our first step? What do we need to do next?
Jared, maybe that sounds like your territory to at least start.
Yeah, happy to take that first. I think do your research to start. It's best if you can get the right platform from the start. And it's going to be different for every church. Hopefully it's PushPay. But give us a call and then give 2 other companies a call and hear their pitch and really do an evaluation. If you have a finance committee, they'll be pretty comfortable with that process. But I am really interested to hear from our guests what that process looked like at the very start. Where do you start things?
There was a lot of fear. Oh my God! Oh, what's going to happen? We're going to lose. You know, I would say my biggest bit of wisdom is be fearless, have courage, don't worry, just keep doing it, follow the steps, one step at a time. You know, just take it nice and slow and easy. Understand, stay focused. You know, stay focused on the parishioner. That's your customer, and your customer is very discerning. So what we tried to do is position it as, you know what, your online giving and your e-giving mode is like a utility. You know, it's something else you can put into the convenience of your everyday, expenses, okay? But we also had the ability to actually earmark different campaigns. So whether it's a clothing drive, a food donation, people like to see where their money is going and the impact and the value of their money and what change it makes. So if you can connect that vision of where the money is going to what, and PushPay gave us the ability to segment that, and then say to them, because you did this, we were able to do that. That is where people start to connect their goodwill and their good nature and their generosity to impacting the lives of other people. That made a big difference for us.
I think we researched 3-4 companies. I think it's important that you have somebody that understands the language. So if you have a millennial in your mix, invite them into the conversation, because to be honest, it's really hard to understand and to pick what's right, I feel like, for your church and what you're looking for. And having a millennial or someone that's familiar with technological language is certainly important.
All right, Brian, anything else there?
I was just going to say that we also had the company that PushPay, when they came, present to all the staff. So people that had different questions about how you register for events and different things like that. So we really tried to get the buy-in of everybody here on staff as well.
Our next question, our parish uses a donor database system, but we don't use it for online giving. Can we do that? Do we need a new vendor to do that? What's the best step there?
I'll take that one. Yeah, it's really common that if your church has a church management software or parish management software, they probably have a built-in giving solution. So when you go to do your evaluations, that's definitely one you should look at, because it's already there, right? You might already be paying for it even. But there's a reason why 8,000 churches have their church management software and then also have PushPay, because often that won't offer what you might need. And so that's what I'll say.
Good. Anything else there, Brian?
I think that's it.
Okay. I do want to give our panelists maybe a final word. If you could just maybe kind of sum up any thoughts that you have, or final advice for other parishes and churches who are going down this road. And I'm going to start with Jared, put you on the spot, and give everyone else a few seconds to collect their thoughts.
Awesome. Yeah, I will go back to my first slide, which was about assessing your current solution. If what you have for online giving isn't actually easy, it will be hard to get your congregation to adopt it. At that point, it's not their fault, it's the systems that you have in place. And so do an assessment, really try it for yourself. If you don't give to your parish, or if you give via cash or check, try what you have for online giving, and go through those 5 focus or areas that I talked about and see how you do in each one.
Thank you, Jared. And if anyone, obviously we've heard a lot about the benefits of PushPay. Anyone interested out there, pushpay.com, get a hold of Jared. Andrea, any final thoughts from you?
Well, I think that we were a little bit ahead of the game only because we had already used a company for online giving. And so for, the last 5 years or so, we saw it increase. So that really, really helped us, but we're hoping to still gather more people. So I can just say that online giving has saved us through this pandemic as well. I mean, we don't have the same amount because we still, when Mass was fully on, we got a lot more cash than we're getting now, obviously. But still, just having those recurring gifts was huge. So, good luck.
Dominic, I don't know that you can beat the train has left the station analogy, but here's your last try.
I would say pray. I would say be fearless. And I would also say know your customer, know your parishioner, be sensitive to their needs, be ministers to their needs, and also realize that they might be confused and fearful. So just do everything you can to remove their fear, because it's really about that. People resist change, especially when it comes to money, and it's a really funky emotional component. Just try to remove that fear, and it takes time. But be resilient and be prayerful.
And having a good communications director is helpful too.
Somebody who's Italian with a sense of humor really does help a lot.
Carla.
I think one of the phrases I've been using a lot during this pandemic is people don't resist change, they resist loss. And so I do feel like moving to online or giving in any form is an issue of loss, and it's pastoral. And so to remember that it's not just functional, there's a loss. What is the loss? To figure that out and to be with people in that, I think will help the process a lot better.
Well said. Would like to thank all of you, Pastor Carla, Jared, Andrea, Pat, Dominic. We appreciate your time, your expertise, just great insight. And we wish everyone the best of luck out there who's wherever you are on that journey, if you're just starting, if you're trying to implement, if you're putting the finishing touches on, trying to better what you already have. But we also know there are a lot of parishes that are hurting financially because they just weren't there. They don't have that process up and in place yet. The Steier Group is talking with churches all the time who find themselves in that situation. We've created our own service, what we call our stabilization appeal, that is an active campaign to try to recoup lost offertory, build reserves, and help with all of this digital maze and getting online and really trying to navigate that process, do it well, so that if there is a second wave, if there is another issue down the road, that parishes and churches don't suffer the way that they are right now. We have a little bit of a little video that has a little bit more on that we're going to leave you with today. But again, want to thank all of our speakers and everyone who joined us. We're very, very appreciative. We wish everyone out there all the best. So have a wonderful day, a wonderful week. God bless, and stay safe. Take care.
Thank you, everyone.
Since 1997, the Steier Group has had one goal: to help you meet your goal. Regardless of the project, building a new church home, making renovations to an existing structure, or helping reduce your debt, the Steier Group is proud to have assisted thousands of church communities across the country when they needed help. Due to the COVID-19 pandemic, the challenge of meeting weekly offertory needs, and in some cases depleted reserves, means the financial foundation of many parishes are no longer on solid footing. It's a troubling situation as parishes look to carry out their mission during unsettling times. As we have been for 23 years, the Steier Group is here to help. The focus of our new parish stabilization appeal is to replenish your offertory, to put you back on pace to meet your fiscal needs, while also restocking or creating reserve funds in the event of a future emergency. When we designed this customized appeal, we recognized that we did not want to create an additional financial burden on churches needing our help. To accomplish this, we will offer maximum flexibility in paying for our services. The Steier Group will not bill your parish until the end of the appeal, and our fees will represent a very small percentage of the funds raised. The Steier Group looks forward to partnering with you on this risk-free venture. For more information, please contact Matt Varela at 402-829-8656 or email him at mvarela@steiergroup.com.
Thanks again, everybody. God bless. Stay safe.